cause. More than 200 mass meetings to protest slave labor in the Congo would be held across the United States. A larger number of gatherings in England, nearly 300 a year at the Crusades' peak, would draw as many as 5,000 people at a time. In London, one letter of protest to the Times on the Congo would be signed by 11 peers, 19 bishops, 76 members of Parliament, the presidents of 7 chambers of commerce, 13 editors of major newspapers, and every Lord Mayor in the country. Speeches about the horrors of King Leopold's Congo would be given as far away as Australia. In Italy, 2 men would fight a duel over the issue. British Foreign Secretary Sir Edward Grey, a man not given to overstatement, would declare that no external question for at least 30 years has moved the country so strongly and so vehemently. This is the story of that movement, of the savage crime that was its target, of the long period of exploration and conquest that preceded it, and of the way the world has forgotten one of the great mass killings of recent history. I knew almost nothing about the history of the Congo until a few years ago, when I noticed a footnote in a book I happened to be reading. Often, when you come across something particularly striking, you remember just where you were when you read it. On this occasion, I was sitting, stiff and tired, late at night, in one of the far rear seats of an airliner crossing the United States from east to west. The footnote was to a quotation by Mark Twain, written, the note said, when he was part of the worldwide movement against slave labor in the Congo, a practice that had taken 5 to 8 million lives. Worldwide movement? 5 to 8 million lives? I was startled. Statistics about mass murders are often hard to prove, but if this number turned out to be even half as high, I thought the Congo would have been one of the major killing grounds of modern times. Why were these deaths not mentioned in the standard litany of our century's horrors? And why had I never before heard of them? I had been writing about human rights for years, and once, in the course of half a dozen trips to Africa, I had been to the Congo. That visit was in 1961. In a Leopoldville apartment, I heard a CIA man who had had too much to drink describe with satisfaction exactly how and where the newly independent country's first Prime Minister, Patrice Lumumba, had been killed a few months earlier. He assumed that any American, even a visiting student like me, would share his relief at the assassination of a man the United States government considered a dangerous leftist troublemaker. In the early morning, a day or two later, I left the country by ferry across the Congo River, the conversation still ringing in my head as the sun rose over the waves and the dark, smooth water slapped against the boat's hull. It was several decades later that I encountered that footnote, and with it my own ignorance of the Congo's early history. Then it occurred to me that, like millions of other people, I had read something about that time and place after all. Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness. However, with my college lecture notes on the novel filled with scribbles about Freudian overtones, mythic echoes, and inward vision, I had mentally filed away the book under fiction, not fact. I began to read more. The further I explored, the more it was clear that the Congo of a century ago had indeed seen a death toll of Holocaust dimensions. At the same time, I unexpectedly found myself absorbed by the extraordinary characters who had peopled this patch of history. Although it was Edmund Dene Morel who had ignited a movement, he was not the first outsider to see King Leopold's Congo for what it was and to try hard to draw the world's attention to it. That role was played by George Washington Williams, a black American journalist and historian who, unlike anyone before him, interviewed Africans about their experience of their white conquerors. It was another black American, William Sheppard, who recorded a scene he came across in the Congo rainforest that would brand itself on the world's consciousness as a symbol of colonial brutality. There were other heroes as well, one of the bravest of whom ended his life on a London gallows. Then, of course, into the middle of the story sailed the young sea captain, Joseph Conrad, expecting the exotic Africa of his childhood dreams, but finding instead what he would call the vilest scramble for loot that ever disfigured the history of human conscience. And looming above them all was King Leopold II, a man as filled with greed and cunning, duplicity and charm as any of the more complex villains of Shakespeare. As I followed the intersecting lives of these men, I realized something else about the terror in the Congo and the controversy that came to surround it. It was the first major international atrocity scandal in the age of the telegraph and the camera. In its mixture of bloodshed on an industrial scale, royalty, sex, the power of